It was a quiet night in the city, the kind where the streets felt empty, and the only sound that echoed in the stillness was the soft rustling of the trees as the wind passed by. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, and everything seemed calm, almost peaceful. But that peace was about to be shattered. A woman walked alone down the street, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She was dressed in a long, dark coat. The collar turned up slightly against the cool night air. Her heels clicked against the ground in a steady rhythm, each step carrying her closer to her destination. She didn't seem concerned. There was something about her that suggested she was used to this kind of solitude. The woman moved with purpose, her face calm, her eyes focused on the road ahead. Unbeknownst to her, a group of young men had been watching from the shadows. Their voices, low and full of bravado, could be heard as they whispered to each other. They were waiting for the perfect moment, an opportunity to strike. It wasn't the first time they'd targeted someone on this street. The area was quiet, and they knew that people passing by at night would be less likely to put up a fight. Their plan was simple: rob the woman, take her purse, and disappear into the night before anyone could notice. The leader of the group, a tall, muscular man with a dark hoodie pulled low over his face, signaled to his companions. They moved quickly, positioning themselves around the woman as she walked. One of them, a smaller figure, approached her from the front while the others circled behind. The woman, unaware of the danger that was closing in on her, continued walking, her eyes straight ahead. She didn't notice the men until it was too late. "Hey!" The man in front of her barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "Give me your purse." The woman stopped, startled by the sudden interruption, but she didn't panic. She looked up slowly, her eyes meeting his with an unflinching calmness. There was something in the way she stood that made the man hesitate for a second. Something about her demeanor that didn't quite fit the role of a helpless victim. The leader of the group, seeing the hesitation in his companion's eyes, stepped forward, his hand on the handle of a knife tucked inside his jacket. "Do what he says," he growled, his voice low and threatening. "We don't want any trouble." The woman's expression didn't change. She simply stood there unmoved, looking at the group as if she were sizing them up. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. The tension in the air was thick now, the thugs growing more aggressive as they took another step forward. "This is our area," one of them spat, his eyes darting nervously between the woman and his friends. "You don't belong here, lady. Hand it over." Still, the woman didn't move. She just stared at him. The tension grew as the minutes dragged on, the sound of her steady breathing the only thing breaking the silence between them. It was almost as if time had slowed down, and the thugs were unsure of how to proceed. For a moment, it seemed like the woman was going to give in. The fear was there, but it wasn't in her eyes, it was in theirs. She knew what they wanted, but she didn't seem to fear them. Her calmness was unsettling, and the group of men started to feel an unexpected sense of uncertainty. The leader, growing impatient, reached for the woman's purse, expecting her to hand it over without a fight. But just as his hand grasped the strap, she finally moved. Her hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with a firm grip that sent a shockwave of surprise through him. He tried to pull away, but her grip was solid, unyielding. "Let go of me," he demanded, struggling to break free. But the woman didn't flinch. In fact, her grip only tightened. She was calm, too calm, and it made the thugs nervous. What kind of woman didn't panic when faced with danger? The leader's eyes widened as he looked at her. "What's your problem?" he growled. "You want to fight?" Instead of answering him, the woman simply pulled her wrist free from his grip. Her movements were smooth and controlled, not the frantic scrambling of someone desperate to escape. There was a confidence in her that was impossible to ignore. One of the thugs behind her, a younger man with a trembling hand, pulled out a gun and pointed it directly at her. "Don't make me shoot," he warned, his voice shaking slightly. The woman's gaze didn't waver. She didn't even flinch at the sight of the weapon. She simply took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the situation with the precision of someone who had seen it all before. The thugs were starting to realize that they weren't dealing with just another victim. She wasn't scared. She wasn't backing down. And for the first time, they weren't sure how to proceed. "What's your name?" the leader asked, his voice losing some of its edge. The woman didn't answer. She only stared at him, still holding the purse strap in one hand, her other hand resting at her side. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken words. Finally, the woman spoke. "I think you're mistaken," she said softly. "This is my area." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The thugs exchanged uncertain glances, the realization dawning on them. They had just tried to rob someone who wasn't afraid of them, and worse, they hadn't even noticed who she was. They had no idea that the woman standing before them, calm and composed, was not just a random passerby. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. The woman stood there, holding the purse strap with one hand, her gaze steady and unwavering. The thugs around her, still tense, could feel the shift in the air. Her demeanor was something they hadn't expected, calm, composed, and not at all like the easy target they had envisioned. The gun remained pointed at her, but the young thug's hand trembled, and the barrel wavered just enough to reveal his fear. The leader, still trying to regain his confidence, took a step forward, his voice trying to sound commanding but coming out unsure. "You think you can just stop us? We'll take whatever we want." But his words fell flat in the stillness. There was something about this woman, something that didn't match the usual victims they had come across. She didn't respond to him at first. Instead, she took a long, deliberate breath, her eyes sweeping over the group. They were young, reckless, and had no idea who they were dealing with. Her mind wasn't on the threat at hand, but rather on the path that had led her here, standing face to face with criminals who had underestimated her. The woman wasn't always a police officer. She hadn't always been the chief of police, an unshakable figure in the city. She hadn't always carried the weight of justice in her hands. No, she had come from a different life, one where survival was a daily battle, and strength wasn't just a virtue, it was a necessity. Her story started long before she put on the uniform, long before she earned the badge and the title.
She had been born in a neighborhood not unlike the one she stood in now.
The streets were rough and opportunities were few. Her family had been poor, living in a rundown apartment surrounded by noise and danger. It was a life that taught her to be resilient, to stand tall when the world tried to push her down. As a young girl, she had watched her mother struggle to make ends meet, working long hours at a job that barely paid enough to cover the rent. The neighborhood was filled with gangs, violence, and a sense of hopelessness that seemed impossible to escape. Yet despite the odds, her mother always insisted that she do her best in school, that she could rise above it all if she worked hard enough. Her mother's words had stuck with her. "Strength isn't just about what you can do with your hands," she had often said. "It's about what you can do with your heart, your mind. Never let anyone take that away from you." Those words echoed in her mind as she stood there on the street, the thugs looming around her. She had lived through hardship, and each challenge had shaped her into the person she was today. The woman had never been afraid of confrontation. In fact, she had come to thrive on it, to use it as fuel to keep moving forward. In high school, she had joined the debate team, not because she wanted to argue, but because she knew the power of words. She knew how to stand her ground, how to make her voice heard. That's when she realized that she had the potential to make a real difference. But that didn't mean her journey had been easy. Her path to becoming a police officer had been filled with obstacles. Some self-inflicted, others set by society. When she graduated, she faced skepticism and doubt from those who didn't believe a woman like her, a black woman from a rough neighborhood, could ever make it in law enforcement. She was told time and again that she wasn't tough enough or that she didn't fit the mold. But with every rejection, every challenge, she only became more determined. She wasn't going to let the world define her. She was going to define herself. Her first years as a patrol officer had been grueling. The streets were unforgiving, and the system she was a part of didn't always have her back. But she never gave up. She worked late nights, pushed herself through physical and mental exhaustion, and slowly earned the respect of her peers. It wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about understanding people, about connecting with them in a way that most others couldn't. She listened, she observed, and most importantly, she learned. Over the years, her hard work paid off. She rose through the ranks, proving herself time and again. When she became the chief of police, she knew that she had finally reached a place where she could truly make a difference. Not just as a law enforcer, but as a symbol of strength, resilience, and hope. She was the living embodiment of the idea that anyone, no matter their background or circumstances, could rise above and make an impact. But as she stood there on the street, facing the group of thugs, none of that seemed to matter. What mattered now was the present moment, the choice she had to make. Would she allow them to take her purse and leave her humiliated? Or would she take control of the situation, showing them what real strength looked like? Her gaze never left the man holding the gun. He was shaking, his finger twitching on the trigger. She could see the fear in his eyes now, but there was something else, too. A flicker of doubt. This was no longer about robbing a defenseless woman. This was about him realizing that he had made a huge mistake. They had picked the wrong target. Slowly, she raised her hand, not in fear, but with the calm confidence of someone who had seen much worse. "You don't know who you're dealing with," she said quietly, her voice steady yet firm. The thug with the gun took a step back, his grip on the weapon faltering. The other men, seeing the shift in his behavior, began to hesitate as well. But the leader, still brimming with arrogance, took a step forward, trying to regain control. "You think you can stop us? You're just a woman. You can't." Before he could finish his sentence, the woman moved. With a speed and precision that seemed almost unnatural, she disarmed him in a single swift motion, knocking the gun from his hand and sending it skidding across the pavement. The leader stumbled back in shock, his confidence crumbling. The thugs stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. They had never encountered anything like this before. The woman wasn't just a victim, she was their worst nightmare. She wasn't just an ordinary woman. She was the chief of police, and she had shown them exactly why they had made the worst mistake of their lives. For a moment, the street fell eerily silent. The thugs were frozen in place, their eyes wide with disbelief. The woman, this calm, composed figure, had just taken their leader down in an instant. They had expected to rob an unsuspecting civilian, but instead, they had found themselves at the mercy of someone far more capable than any of them could have imagined. The leader, still reeling from the shock of losing control, stumbled backward. His hands flailed as if he were searching for something to grab onto. The fear in his eyes was palpable. He had no idea who she was, but now it was too late for him to turn back. "Who are you?" he muttered, his voice cracking. His bravado had vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of panic. He had never been so terrified in his life. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step forward. She didn't need to say much. Her mere presence spoke volumes. Her calm demeanor in the face of danger had already rattled them to their core. The thugs had assumed she was just another woman on a quiet street, someone easy to overpower. But now they understood how wrong they were. "I think it's too late for introductions," she said softly, her voice steady and controlled. "But since you're asking, I'll tell you." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. "I'm the chief of police." The words seemed to hang in the air, thick with a kind of finality that made the thugs shudder. Their eyes darted to each other as if they were searching for an escape route, some way to undo the mistake they had just made. But there was no escaping now. They had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The woman looked at each of them in turn. She saw the fear, the hesitation, the realization dawning in their eyes. They had picked the wrong person to rob. They hadn't just encountered a victim. They had encountered a force of nature, someone who had spent her life preparing for moments like this. Her grip on the purse strap never loosened. She stood tall, unshaken, in control of the situation. It wasn't the badge she wore that made her powerful. It was the years of struggle, the strength that had been built within her through adversity. She had faced far greater challenges than this, and as her eyes met the leader's, she saw him for what he truly was. Just another man who had underestimated her. "You don't know how much trouble you're in," she said, her voice now tinged with authority. "I'll make sure you regret this." The leader, still trying to compose himself, took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Look, we didn't know." His words faltered as he realized how weak his defense sounded. The woman didn't wait for him to finish. She turned her gaze toward the others, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've made a big mistake, and now I'm going to make sure it's your last." The tension in the air was almost unbearable now. The thugs were no longer sure of what to do. The woman had taken control, and they knew they had no chance of winning this fight. They had hoped to rob someone who wouldn't fight back, but instead, they had encountered a woman who had seen more danger in a single day than they would ever experience in their lives. The young man with the gun, still standing behind her, fumbled nervously with the weapon. His fingers were slick with sweat, his grip unsteady. He had never expected to feel fear, not in a situation like this. But now, the reality of what was happening hit him like a tidal wave. He had a gun, yes, but in front of him was someone who could take it from him without blinking. It was a stark realization, one that left him frozen in place. The woman didn't even need to look at him to know what he was thinking. She had already assessed the situation, had already calculated every possible outcome. She knew that the moment they tried to make a move, she could end it all with a single swift motion. But she wasn't interested in violence. She didn't need to prove anything. The lesson she wanted them to learn wasn't one of fear. It was one of respect. She had earned the right to stand here to face down these men, and she wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. "You're not getting away," she said, her voice cold but firm. "You'll be arrested before the night is over, and I'm not going to let you do this to anyone else." At that moment, the sound of sirens broke the tension in the air. The flashing lights of police vehicles appeared in the distance, drawing nearer with every second. The woman's colleagues were on their way, but she didn't need them to finish this. She had already taken control. The thugs, seeing the lights in the distance, started to panic. The fear they had tried to suppress came rushing back in full force. They were trapped. There was no way out now. The woman had outsmarted them, outclassed them, and now they were going to pay the price for their foolishness. The leader, realizing there was no escape, took one last desperate step. "You can't just leave us here," he shouted. "You can't," but the woman raised a hand, silencing him. "You're already done. It's over." As the police vehicles arrived, the woman calmly reached for her radio. "Dispatch, this is Chief Daniels. I need backup at my location. I've apprehended the suspects." Her voice was steady, unwavering. She didn't need to look back at the thugs to know that they were defeated. The moment they tried to rob her, they had sealed their fate. The sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder with every second. But the moment the woman, Chief Daniels, had called for backup, she knew this wasn't about to end quietly. The thugs, still reeling from the shock of facing the chief of police, were in complete disarray. Fear had replaced their earlier bravado, and with every passing moment, they realized just how much they had misjudged her. The young man who had held the gun now stood frozen, his fingers trembling around the weapon. The other thugs, equally rattled, exchanged nervous glances. They had been certain this would be an easy score, an unsuspecting victim, a purse to snatch, a quick getaway. But now they were standing before someone who had risen far beyond what they could imagine. She wasn't just a victim. They had unwittingly crossed paths with someone far more powerful than they had ever expected. Chief Daniels stood tall, her stance unyielding. Every movement, every glance was deliberate, controlled. She knew the dynamics had shifted. The thugs had gone from predators to prey in the blink of an eye. But despite their panic, she wasn't rushing to call in the cavalry or escalate the situation. No, this was her moment to teach them a lesson they would never forget. "You've made a grave mistake," she said, her voice low but clear. Her eyes locked with the leader's, daring him to deny the obvious, not just in trying to rob me, but in underestimating me. The leader, now visibly sweating, took a step back. His earlier arrogance had vanished. He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps a final attempt at negotiation, a desperate plea for mercy, but the words didn't come. His throat felt tight, constricted by the realization that this woman wasn't just a force to be reckoned with. She was the law itself. "I'm not afraid of you," the leader finally managed to say, his voice strained but defiant. "You may have the badge, but you're just a woman. You can't take all of us down. We have the numbers." Chief Daniels raised an eyebrow. The audacity of his words only fueled her focus. "Numbers don't make you stronger," she replied. "It's the quality of your actions that determines your strength. And what you're doing now, what you've done, is weak." The leader, realizing his attempts at intimidation were failing, tried a different tactic. He gestured toward the young man still holding the gun, now shaking uncontrollably in his hands. "He's not like us," the leader said quickly, trying to save face. "He's just a kid, man. We didn't—" "Stop," Chief Daniels interjected, her voice firm, cutting him off. "There's no excuse for what you've done. You thought you could take advantage of someone, hurt someone, and get away with it. But you're not going anywhere. You'll be facing the consequences of your actions, all of you." The young man, the one holding the gun, looked at the others in the group, his face pale with fear. The gun now felt like a heavy burden, and he could no longer hold it steady. His hand lowered involuntarily, the weapon now dangling loosely at his side. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He wasn't ready for this kind of confrontation. In fact, he had probably never intended to get involved in something like this at all. The decision to rob anyone, had been spur of the moment, driven by desperation and poor judgment. I don't want to hurt anyone, the young man stammered. I didn't mean for this to happen. Chief Daniels's eyes softened ever so slightly. It was a fleeting moment of empathy, but she didn't allow herself to be swayed. She had been where he was once, young and unsure, but she had learned the hard way that choices had consequences. She couldn't let him off the hook just because he was scared. I don't want anyone to get hurt either, she said calmly, meeting his gaze. But you need to understand something. You've crossed a line, and now you have to answer for it. He looked at the ground, his body trembling as the weight of the situation settled in. The reality was harsh. He had made a choice, and now he had to face the consequences of that decision. Behind her, the sound of approaching police vehicles grew louder, their sirens cutting through the night. Chief Daniels didn't flinch at the sound. She had already handled the situation. The thugs may have thought they had control at first, but now they were at her mercy, and she wasn't about to let them escape easily. As the first police car arrived, followed by another, the officers who stepped out paused for a moment, taking in the scene. They knew Chief Daniels well, knew her reputation, her strength, and her unflinching commitment to justice. But seeing her in action in this situation was a different experience altogether. They could see that she had not only de-escalated a dangerous situation, but had done so with poise and authority. One officer, a seasoned veteran, approached her, a look of respect on his face. "Chief," he said, "you okay?" Chief Daniels gave him a small nod, her gaze never leaving the group of thugs. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice steady. "These gentlemen, however, are about to learn what happens when you pick the wrong person to mess with." The thugs, now surrounded by officers, had no choice but to surrender. Their bravado had crumbled, replaced by resignation. The young man with the gun was the first to drop his weapon, his hands trembling as he did so. The others followed suit, their shoulders slumped in defeat. Chief Daniels watched as her officers moved in to cuff the criminals, their faces a mix of awe and relief. They had seen their chief in action before, but never quite like this. She wasn't just a symbol of authority. She was someone who knew exactly how to wield that authority. Someone who could take control of any situation, no matter how chaotic it seemed. As the thugs were loaded into the back of the police car, Chief Daniels stood quietly watching them. Her mind was already moving forward, already preparing for the next step. This was just one battle in a much larger war. But in this moment she had proven something that would resonate far beyond this street, far beyond this city. She wasn't just the chief of police. She was a protector, a force to be reckoned with, and no one was ever going to forget that. The quiet hum of the police sirens gradually faded as the officers led the thugs away in handcuffs, their faces still marked by the shock of the confrontation. Chief Daniels stood alone on the street, her posture upright and confident, but her mind was already racing ahead to the next steps. Her officers were good. They had handled the situation well, but they all knew this was her moment. She had neutralized the threat, kept her composure, and done so with an efficiency that no one would soon forget. As the last police vehicle pulled away, leaving her standing alone in the fading red lights, Chief Daniels felt a strange mixture of pride and exhaustion. She had faced far more dangerous situations, but there was something about this night, about the way these men had underestimated her, that stung in a way she couldn't shake. It wasn't just the robbery, it was the assumption that because she was a woman, because she was black, she couldn't possibly be someone of strength, someone with power. They thought she was weak. They thought they could take her purse, intimidate her, and walk away as if nothing happened. But in that moment she had taken control, and she had shown them exactly what kind of woman she was. Yet, despite the rush of victory, the emotions of the night were not lost on her. The young thug, the one who had held the gun, was still fresh in her mind. She had seen the fear in his eyes, the doubt that had crept in as he realized just how far his actions had gone. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He was a scared boy, caught in a situation that had spiraled out of control. She had known that he wasn't like the others. She had known that he could be redeemed if given the chance, and yet she also knew that his choices had consequences. As she turned to head back to her car, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Chief." It was Officer Ramirez, one of her most trusted lieutenants. He had been in the thick of the action, but unlike the others, he didn't rush to congratulate her. His eyes were serious, his brow furrowed with concern. "Ramirez," Chief Daniels acknowledged, her voice as steady as it had been all night. "You handled them well," Ramirez said, his tone respectful but carrying a weight of something else, something unsaid. "But are you all right?" "You're not. You're not shaken up by any of this?" Chief Daniels paused, taking in his words. The question wasn't about the physical danger. It wasn't about the confrontation with the thugs. It was about something deeper, the toll this kind of work had on a person. She had faced so many life-and-death situations in her career that at this point, she rarely paused to consider how they affected her emotionally. But Ramirez, who had worked with her for years, knew better than most how the weight of this job could creep in. "I'm fine, Ramirez," she replied, her voice unwavering. She could see the concern in his eyes and she appreciated it. But there was no time for weakness. "I've been through worse. It's the nature of the job." He nodded but didn't look convinced. "I get it. But you don't always have to be the strong one, Chief. You don't always have to be the one holding it all together. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself too. We all need to check in on each other." Chief Daniels wasn't used to being the one who needed checking on. She had always been the protector, the one who led others, the one who inspired confidence and courage in those around her. But as she looked at Ramirez, she realized that in this moment he was right. She couldn't carry everything on her own forever. The weight of leadership, of the responsibility she had to her team, to the people of the city, it was immense. And tonight it felt heavier than usual. "I'll be all right," she said quietly, a brief smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "But thanks for checking in. I'll handle it. I always do." Ramirez didn't press the issue. Instead, he gave a small nod of understanding. "You know where to find me if you need anything." Chief Daniels watched him walk away, her mind still swirling with the events of the night. It wasn't just the robbery that was on her mind. It was the message behind it. The thugs had thought they could take what they wanted, that they could dominate and control someone who appeared to be weak. But in the end, it was their own weakness, underestimating the strength of the woman they targeted, that had led to their downfall. She had seen it time and time again in her line of work. People who judged others based on appearances, on preconceived notions about their power, their status, their worth. It was a problem that ran deep in society, one that she herself had battled against for years. But tonight she had been a living testament to the truth that strength comes in many forms, and that no matter how much someone tried to break her down, no matter how much they tried to make her feel small or insignificant, she would always rise. She had proved that to herself and to those men on the street. The sound of her phone vibrating in her pocket snapped her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message from her assistant, detailing the next set of meetings for the week. As much as the message seemed like a distraction, it was a reminder. Life didn't stop just because of one victory. There was always more to be done, always more to accomplish. Chief Daniels slipped the phone back into her coat pocket, her mind shifting back into focus. She had a city to protect, a team to lead, and a future to shape. The events of the night would soon become just another chapter in her ongoing journey. A reminder that strength wasn't just about how you handled a crisis. It was about how you kept moving forward, no matter what. As she stepped into her car and started the engine, the lights of the city flickered in the rearview mirror. She took a deep breath, the weight of the night's events still lingering in her chest. But there was no time for rest, no time to reflect too much. Tomorrow would come with its own set of challenges, its own obstacles to overcome, and Chief Daniels would face them, as she always did, head on without hesitation, and with the strength of someone who had learned to never back down. The early morning sun had barely begun to rise, casting a soft orange glow across the city as Chief Daniels drove through the quiet streets. The adrenaline from the night before had worn off, leaving a sense of tired determination in its place. The events of the robbery, the confrontation with the thugs, and the subsequent arrest were still fresh in her mind. But now, with the morning ahead of her, it was time to focus on the bigger picture. As she approached the police station, she could see the familiar figures of her officers milling around, preparing for the day ahead. Their eyes, however, were different today. There was a new respect in their gaze, a recognition of what had happened the night before. Chief Daniels wasn't just their leader. She had proved once again that she was a force to be reckoned with. She parked her car and stepped out, her boots clicking sharply against the pavement. She didn't need a grand entrance. Her presence was enough. She knew the officers would be waiting for her, wondering what would come next. They had seen her handle crisis after crisis, but last night had been different. Last night she had faced danger, and instead of backing down, she had taken control. It was a story they would tell for years to come, one that would live on in the city's memory as a testament to her leadership. As she walked through the front doors of the station, the air was thick with anticipation. The officers who had been with her on the street the night before greeted her with nods and smiles. They didn't need to say anything. Her reputation had already spoken for her. Chief Daniels had handled the situation with such poise and authority that it had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed it. "Good morning, Chief." Officer Ramirez greeted her as she passed by his desk. "Morning," she replied, giving him a quick smile. But she could see the lingering questions in his eyes, the curiosity about what had happened since the arrest. The thugs were already locked up, but the consequences of their actions would continue to unfold in the coming days. As the ripple effect of the robbery stretched far beyond just this one street, she headed straight for her office, her mind focused on the paperwork she knew awaited her. But as she passed by the bullpen, she noticed a few familiar faces gathered near the coffee machine. They were speaking in hushed tones, clearly discussing the events of the night. Chief Daniels wasn't one to eavesdrop, but she could feel their gaze follow her as she passed. Her assistant, Angela, was waiting for her in the office, a stack of reports on the desk in front of her. "Good morning, Chief," Angela said, her voice almost too cheerful for the early hour. "There's a lot of fallout from last night's incident. The media's already on it, and the mayor wants to meet with you later today to discuss the PR strategy." Chief Daniels sighed inwardly. The aftermath of any high-profile situation was always messy, but she knew how to handle it. She didn't have time to deal with the politics of it right now, though. She had a job to do, and it wasn't about managing her image, it was about managing justice. Set up the meeting with the mayor, Angela, and make sure the media knows we'll be issuing a statement later today. Keep it tight, nothing sensational, just the facts, Chief Daniels instructed, her voice calm but firm. Angela nodded, flipping through her notes. "Got it, Chief. I'll also need to clear up some details with the district attorney's office. They're already preparing the charges for the thugs, but they want to make sure they've got everything in order." Chief Daniels gave a curt nod. "Get it done. We don't want any loopholes. This needs to be airtight." She sat down at her desk and began sifting through the morning's reports. As she read through the details of the arrest, a sense of satisfaction washed over her. The thugs were already being processed, and they would face the full weight of the law. But the real question was whether this would be enough. The leader of the gang, the one who had tried to intimidate her, was already known to the police. His name was Andre Moore, a small-time criminal with a history of violent behavior. He'd been arrested before, but he always seemed to find a way to slip through the cracks. It wasn't just Moore that bothered her, though. It was the entire system that allowed men like him to keep coming back. She knew that taking him down would be a victory, but it wouldn't be the end of the story. There were always more like him, always others who thought they could get away with crimes without consequence. Chief Daniels rubbed her temples, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. This wasn't just about stopping one robbery. It was about dismantling the systems of fear and violence that allowed people like Moore to thrive. She had always believed in justice, but she was beginning to realize that the fight wasn't just about enforcing laws. It was about changing the mindset of the people who broke them. As she was lost in thought, Angela interrupted her, handing her a stack of papers. "The mayor's office just confirmed your meeting. He wants to talk to you in an hour." Chief Daniels stood up and stretched, trying to shake off the lingering fatigue from the night before. "I'll be ready." Before leaving the office, she paused for a moment, looking out the window. The city she had spent her life protecting stretched out before her. It was a city full of contradictions, beauty and decay, hope and despair. But it was her city, and she would fight for it no matter the cost. As she walked out of her office, she caught the eyes of her officers once more. They were watching her, and for the first time, she realized that they weren't just looking at her as their leader. They were looking at her as a symbol of what was possible even in the darkest of circumstances. And she knew deep down that her work was far from over. Her meeting with the mayor was about to begin, but in her heart, Chief Daniels knew that the most important battles were yet to come. The thugs were just the beginning. The true fight lay in the fight for justice, in breaking the cycle that allowed people to be preyed upon, and in changing the system that had allowed men like Andre Moore to continue to walk free. This wasn't just about law enforcement. It was about societal change. And Chief Daniels was determined to lead the charge. She wasn't just fighting for the safety of her city. She was fighting to rewrite the very rules that had kept the cycle of violence spinning for far too long. By the time Chief Daniels stepped into the mayor's office, the weight of the previous days was beginning to press on her shoulders. The morning had already been filled with the usual chaos. Calls from the media, internal reports, and discussions with the district attorney's office about the thugs who had tried to rob her. There was no time for rest, no time to reflect. The job didn't stop, not even for a second. She had learned long ago that the world didn't wait for you to catch your breath. Mayor Thompson stood by the window looking out over the city skyline. His face was serious, his brow furrowed. He didn't turn to face her immediately, but the moment Chief Daniels entered the room, she could feel the weight of his presence. He was a tall man, older, his once dark hair now peppered with gray. He had a commanding figure, one that inspired respect and fear in equal measure. As a politician, he had weathered countless storms, and now he was dealing with a storm of a different kind, the fallout from last night's robbery and its subsequent media frenzy. "Chief," Mayor Thompson said without turning. His voice clipped, like he had rehearsed his words. "I hope you understand the mess we're in now. This is bigger than just an attempted robbery. The media's already turning it into a spectacle." "I know," Chief Daniels replied, her voice steady, but her words laced with the calmness of someone who had already anticipated the storm. "But the story isn't about me. It's about what happens when people think they can take what doesn't belong to them. When they assume they can hurt others without consequence." She could see the mayor tense slightly, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that Chief Daniels had seen him make countless times over the years. "You have to understand. I'm getting calls from every direction," Mayor Thompson continued, his voice rising just a touch. "This is bad for the city's image. The optics here are problematic. A chief of police on the front page of every paper tackling a group of thugs who tried to rob her? It's a distraction. We need to focus on the positive aspects, not make you a hero in the middle of a PR nightmare." Chief Daniels walked to the window beside him, standing tall as she looked out over the city. The streets below seemed peaceful now, but she knew better. Behind those quiet facades were communities that lived in fear, neighborhoods that faced dangers far worse than anything the media could sensationalize. "I didn't ask to be in the spotlight, Mayor," she said, her gaze never leaving the view. "But I'm not going to pretend that what happened last night didn't happen. These men thought they could steal from me, intimidate me, and get away with it. I didn't stop them because I wanted to be a hero. I stopped them because it was the right thing to do. They were committing a crime. I had a duty to protect the city, whether it's from a street thug or someone who sits in a high office." There was a pause as Mayor Thompson absorbed her words. He finally turned to face her, his gaze piercing yet conflicted. "You're right," he said after a long silence, his tone softer now. "But the media won't see it that way. They'll focus on you, on the fact that you're the victim and the one who brought them down, and that's the story we can't afford to let get out of hand." Chief Daniels crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You think this is just about the media narrative? This isn't about me, and it never was. This is about power dynamics. It's about making sure that those who believe they can exploit others, whether they're on the street or in positions of authority, understand that they can't." She looked him dead in the eye now, her voice unwavering. "The real story here is about justice. It's about showing the city that we will not tolerate people who prey on others, who think they can take advantage of the vulnerable. If we let this slide, if we sweep it under the rug for the sake of appearances, we send the message that it's okay to walk over people as long as you're in the right place at the right time. And that's not the message I'm willing to send." For a moment, there was no response from the mayor. He simply looked at her, his face unreadable. But Chief Daniels could see the gears turning in his mind. He understood what she was saying, even if he didn't like it. Politics and power were messy, and sometimes it took more than just enforcing the law to make a difference. It took courage. It took moral fortitude. "I can't pretend this is easy, Daniels," the mayor said, his voice quieter now. "But I do understand. I'll back you up on this as much as I can. But the city's image is fragile, and we both know it. I just hope you're ready for the fallout." Chief Daniels gave a small nod, her eyes never leaving the skyline. She had never been one to back down from a challenge, and this was no different. The media could spin their stories, the public could have their opinions, but none of that would change the truth. "We're going to handle this properly," Chief Daniels said, her voice resolute. "We'll issue a statement, but we're going to make it clear that this was about justice. No more, no less. We won't let the narrative be twisted by anyone, not the media, not the criminals, not even the people who think they control the story." The mayor looked at her for a moment longer, then sighed, as if the weight of the conversation had lifted. "All right, we'll do it your way, but understand this isn't over. There will be more to deal with." Chief Daniels nodded once. "I've been dealing with more for years. We'll manage. But if we want to see real change in this city, we have to stand by what's right, even when it's uncomfortable." As she turned to leave, the mayor's voice called out to her again. "You've already made an impact, Daniels. The whole city is watching now." "Then let them watch," she replied, walking toward the door. "Because I'm not stopping. Not now, not ever."